Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 13th and final Google Hangout session of the Pixel Project's 5th annual International Women's Day edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. My name is Anusha Kandasivam. I'm your moderator for this session. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 14 award-winning and best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking, and also to help us reveal the first mystery celebrity male role model portrait in our Celebrity Male Role Model Pixel Reveal campaign. So I'll be telling you a bit more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser in a little bit. We have lots and lots of exclusive author goodies. But meanwhile, if you want to find out more about the Pixel Project, please do go to www.thepixelproject.net. Okay, so for this final session, we have very special guests. We have a live discussion and Q&A session with the awesome author Alisha Rai. Alisha writes award-winning, emotionally complex contemporary romance novels and is frequently sought after as a speaker on a range of topics covering romance and media. She is the first author to have an indie published book appear on the Washington Post's annual Best Book list. Her books have also been named Best Book of the Year by NPR, Vulture, Entertainment Weekly, Amazon, Kirkus, Bustle, and Cosmopolitan magazine. So you can tell she's pretty amazing. And her novels have won the RT Reviewers' Choice Awards for erotic and contemporary romance. And when she's not writing, Alisha is traveling and tweeting. Now, Alisha has she's really generously donated some really awesome goodies to the stash of author goodies that we have set up as perks on the Read for Pixels Rally App fundraising page. So she has donated two treats. The first treat is a written critique session for a 1,000-word query letter or excerpt of a work in progress or proposal. So this is perfect for anybody who writes romance and who needs an experienced pair of eyes to provide feedback beyond your writing group and your beta readers. And treat number 2 is a one-to-one Skype call with Alisha, where she's happy to chat about her books and about writing and reading romance and much more. Now, the thing is, both of these goodies have been already snapped up by awesome donors. So these two amazing people have both requested to remain anonymous, but we just want to say thank you so much. You know who you are. You're both amazing. We've raised $3,520 so far towards our $5,000 goal. The fundraiser will end on April 15th. So please do give generously. We have so many more goodies up on the Rally App page. And all funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. Now, I'll be telling you more about all the other goodies and how you can get to the Rally App page a little later in the session, how you can help the cause by donating. So please stay tuned for that. And meanwhile, Alisha is going to do a reading, and then we'll have a live discussion and Q&A. And you guys can participate in the Q&A session. You'll be watching this on YouTube. You can see a chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. You can type your questions in there. Our chat box moderator, Denisha, will be monitoring it, and she'll relay the questions to me, and I will read the questions out to Alisha. Okay, so enough from me. Here is Alisha. Hi, Alisha.
Hi, how's it going?
Great. Thank you so much for being with us today. I believe you're going to start out with a reading from Hate to Want You.
I am, yes. So this is the first book in my Forbidden Heart series, and it kicks off the series. And just a quick setup, because I'm reading towards more the end of the book, just because it's my favorite scene and I really enjoyed writing it. But so the book is, I call it Romeo and Juliet with a happy ending, because Romeo and Juliet is very well known as not a romance, it's a love story. And the difference is they die at the end. So, and so, you know, part of this is the main characters, the hero and the heroine, were childhood sweethearts. Something happened in their family. They were sort of torn apart. They couldn't, you know, their families became enemies. But they've been meeting every year for like the past 10 years for a night. And now she's back in town. And so they're trying to figure out, you know, themselves. And one reason why I really like this scene in particular is because the heroine Livy has depression, and I have depression, and, you know, I know a lot of women with depression and anxiety. And, you know, one thing that, you know, I think we grapple a lot with as women, or, you know, whether you have these things or not is, ideas of what's strong and what's weak, and what that makes you out to be in other people's eyes. So yes, let me read the scene. Livy had lied. She cried all the way home. With grim determination, she took 10 minutes in her mother's driveway, blowing her nose and using the tiny tube of concealer in her purse to cover the puffiness under her eyes. It was late, but it was entirely possible her aunt might still be awake. She would not let anyone see what a mess she was inside, like an object of pity. Don't think about it. Get upstairs, get to your room, and then you can fall apart. When she entered the house and heard the murmur of a late night talk show, Livy was glad she'd taken the time to tidy up. She crept to the stairs, wincing over every creak. She was almost to the first step when her aunt's low voice came from the living room. Livy? She ran her fingers through her hair, then walked to the arched opening, tugging on her wrinkled dress. Her aunt sat in her usual chair, her usual knitting in her hands. The only light in the room came from a small Tiffany lamp next to her chair and the TV. Livy stuck to the shadows right inside the door. Hey, Aunt Millie. She was proud her voice wasn't tear-fogged and hoarse. You're home late. Her aunt looked at her, and her ready smile faded. She put down her knitting. Are you okay? Livy nodded, trying to control her lower lip. Yes. Come here. I should go to bed. Come here. Livy didn't often hear that commanding tone from Miley. Her feet moved before her head could catch up. She tried to straighten her shoulders. Head up, chin up, no tears. She was tough and strong, not some dumb girl screaming in her bedroom over a boy. Miley's eyes softened, and she held out her hand. Oh, my love, what did that man do to you? Her lip quivered, and the next thing she knew, she was on her knees next to her aunt's chair, her face buried in her lap as she sobbed. Miley's calloused hands swept over her hair, keeping it from her wet cheeks. Livy didn't know how long she wept there, her aunt stroking her, but eventually her sobs turned to silent tears. She turned her head to speak. Does everyone know about me and Nicholas? Well, I don't know about everyone. I ran into Daryl's mother at book club, and she told me he saw the two of you together at the cafe. Ugh, the cheerful kid behind the cafe counter. Miley continued petting Livy's head. It was natural for you to want to see him again. I slept with him. That's natural, too. There was no judgment in her aunt's voice. I thought we could resolve what was between us. Is that really what you thought, my love? Is that really why you saw him again? Or were you holding out some hope that this time it would all work out? Livy started to say no, but her breath arrested. She knew what she'd wanted him to say. I am so stupid. No, you're not. It could never work out. Never isn't a good word, Miley said. It's complicated. I think I still love him. The words whispered into the dimly lit room, her worst truth fully revealed. I can't stay away from him, even when I try. Even when I know it'll only hurt me. If that's not stupid, I don't know what is. Counter thought. I deserve compassion. That's love, not stupidity. It's irrational. If someone told you love is rational, they're a liar. Sometimes you can't stop loving someone. There was such understanding in Miley's voice. Livy looked up. In her memory, her aunt had always been happily single, but there was a brooding sadness in her dark eyes that told Livy she understood. Did you love someone like that? Yes. Her name was Jacinda. Miley's fingers separated Livy's hair and started braiding. We were young. My parents disapproved. Your father told me he would give me money to run away with her. Start over fresh somewhere new. But I was scared, so I broke things off. What happened to her? I don't know. She left for New York City. She came back a few times until one day she didn't. We could find out where she is now. Oh, I don't know if I'm brave enough for that. Melee tugged on Livy's crooked braid affectionately. I'm not quite like you. Oh, I'm not brave at all. Fresh tears stung her eyes. I am a good person, something whispered in her head. Please let me be compassionate to me. But she just couldn't. Nicholas found out how I reacted when we ended things last time. What do you mean? About how depressed I was. Her depression then had been triggered by multiple events, that meeting in the woods, the final push she'd needed. Good. He should know how much he hurt you. Livy lifted her head at the unexpectedly bloodthirsty relish in her aunt's voice. I never wanted him to know. It makes me look so weak. Olivia. Livy straightened at her aunt's stern tone. Yes? You were hurt. It's not a weakness to love someone like that. It's not a weakness to be in pain when that love is ripped away from you. It's not exactly strength to fall apart when a man dumps you. And that was probably how Nicholas had seen the episode. Says who? Says everyone. Strength was soldiering on, with or without a man. Strength was being invulnerable. Oh, is that right? Melee straightened, her nostrils flaring. Who did the heavy lifting in yours and Nicholas's relationship, Livy? I don't know what you mean. I mean, you were the one who made sure his needs were being met. He met my needs too, she felt compelled to say. Yes, fine. But it was you who said I love you first, I bet. You who coaxed him into asking you out. You who kept your sadness a secret from him at the end. Partly out of pride, but possibly also because you didn't want him to be hurt. Miley grimaced. Society tells women that they have to be responsible for the emotional health of their relationships, and then tells them that they're weak for feeling emotions. What kind of message is that? Nicholas was part of your world, and up until the end, he was a good, dependable part of it. Why shouldn't you have grieved when you lost him? Because Melee tapped her under her chin. Do you know what I remember during that time? I remember you curling up next to me at your father's funeral and holding my hand. I remember you getting out of bed when Jackson was arrested and helping me find an attorney. I remember you packing up your things in one duffel and leaving for a new city where you knew no one. If you fear you aren't strong, put those fears to rest. She swallowed. Some nights I cried so hard for Nico, I physically hurt. So? Mila made a dismissive noise. Strength isn't about how much you cry or the bad nights you might have. Strength is here. She tapped Livy's forehead. And here. She poked a blunt finger into Livy's chest. You can be strong and have moments of incredible despair when everything feels like it's collapsing in on you. And yes, when you feel like you want to die. Those moments are not weaknesses. They are simply moments, and they are not you. Her aunt spoke with such certainty, the tiny defenseless part of her, bleating about how she was dumb and silly, was momentarily silenced. Livy brushed at her cheeks. Okay. Livy, you are sweet and rebellious and talented and mouthy. You have had to endure a number of tragedies in your life, and you still put one foot in front of another. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Cut yourself some slack. Her fingers trembled. I'll try. Don't try, do. Livy nodded. It was hard after so many years of berating herself for every emotion she'd ever had. But her aunt was right. That needed to stop. It's late, she finally managed. We should go to bed. I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks for that. That was great. And we actually have a comment from one of the viewers, Natasha R. says, I love this interaction in the book.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'll come back to that in a bit, but I want to start with maybe a simpler question.
Okay.
Some authors I've asked this question to don't think it's very simple, but I'll ask you. All of your stories feature really complex female protagonists, such as Livy Kane, who we just saw, who in Hate to Want You, and Sadia Ahmad in Wrong to Need You, Evangeline Chandler. They're all tough and resilient, and they're determined women. They do the best with the cards that they're dealt with. So the first question is, who or what are the inspirations behind these wonderful female characters?
Oh gosh, I think it's all the great women I know. I was raised, my father passed away when I was young, so I was raised by my mother and my grandmother. And so it was a household of women. I have one brother, bless him. But it's three sisters and a brother and my mom and my grandma. So, and I look up, I look up to my little sister. I look up to my older sister. I have female cousins and like most of the close friendships I've had over the years have been women as well. And I do very much, appreciate how that's sort of the running theme. I mean, no matter what hand my mom and grandma were dealt, and they were dealt quite a few, rough hands. At the end of the day, they put one foot in front of another, and the amount of emotional labor that they carried on their shoulders was immense, and they still just did the best they could with what they had. And that was kind of the message they always passed along to me, do the best you can with what you have. If you can't do it, then that's okay. And so that's, hopefully the message that I get across with a lot of these women characters.
Do you consciously create them like this, or do they just kind of materialize and happen to be part of the story as you envision it?
No, I usually create them first. I'm always, I think about ways that, I think about I write character sheets first. That's the first thing I ever do. And then the story comes later, like the plot of what they're going through comes later. And it is a lot easier for me to actually write women than it is to write men. One thing that I struggled with when writing Hate to Want You actually was, it was the first time I'd ever started a book with the male protagonist's point of view. And it made it very hard. Like I rewrote that opening again and again and again because I was like, why can't it gel? And that was why, I think, because I just could not, like, it took me a longer time to get into his head than it did in hers. So that is like my one writing quirk sometimes, is that I'll write the first draft and then I'll go back and I'll go, oh, right, the hero. And I'll redo it, solely focusing on his points of view because I'm like, I don't want to shortchange him because I'm focusing so much on the woman's story.
Yeah, that's kind of refreshing actually, because in maybe outside the romance genre, you do see that a lot. You see a lot of very male focused, stories. So it's kind of fun to hear that you focus on the women.
Romance, even in the romance genre, we have, there's something kind of commonly called a book boyfriend, which is, like your favorite heroes from books. And I knew I had made it when someone started talking to me about like, oh, this is my book girlfriend. And I was like, oh, yay.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, I'm glad. And I'm glad, like, I'm fine. Yes, love the heroes, but I'm really, really happy when they really connect with the heroine.
Okay. So speaking of your heroines, the romance genre, at least in English language romance books, has been predominantly white with white heroines. As someone who writes interracial romances with Asian heroines like Akira Mori and Leila Karimi and Lana Malik, you have twice the number of female stereotypes to wrangle with. So you have genre stereotypes and you have cultural stereotypes of Asian women. What are some of the methods you've used to subvert these stereotypes to create well-rounded female characters that women can relate to? And do you have any of your romance readers reacted to your female? How have they reacted to these female characters, all of whom do indeed break cultural stereotypes?
When you talk about, also, I just want to note that when I first started writing romance, the first drafts I wrote always had white characters in it. And one of the reasons, and I think a lot of writers of color struggle with this, is that we've been just sort of spoon-fed this particular dominant view, and it's hard to break out of it. And when I did, that was sort of when I found my voice. So it's difficult to do, and I understand why sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But I have to say, it is very challenging because there is sort of this, one true narrative that media assigns to a lot of different cultures. I mean, whether you're Black or Asian or South Asian or, whatever background you might be from. For South Asians, I think it's a little bit particularly interesting because nobody's really good at geography. So it's like, what stereotype are you putting on me?
Nobody knows where you're from or
where I'm from. Like, you don't know where this character's from. So it's very difficult because, you're just some sort of ambiguous ground to them. But so like we have to battle with a lot of different stereotypes, I think, especially when I write. So that's always in the back of my head. You know, I try to make it very clear, like, okay, this is a Pakistani American heroine, this is an Indian American heroine, this is a Black heroine. So I try to, like, you know, make it as clear as possible on the page. But I also just, I think it's really important when we create media, and I don't just write, you know, South Asian American women or characters. Um, and usually when I start with any character, I just think like, and from any background with any issue, you know, with any marginalized group, I think, you know, I want to make them, if I can't imagine them having and love and wealth and, you know, all this stuff, if anything like that seems odd to me, then something's off, right? Like, so when I start writing, you know, and when I wrote my first book way back when, the heroine was Indian American, and I got a lot of, you know, this isn't realistic. It's not realistic, this romance. Like, it's not, you know. And I remember thinking at the time, well, why is it, if I'd made her white, would it have been realistic? And I think the idea is like, oh, she'd be too timid for that, or she'd be too shy, or whatever cultural stereotype they had in their head, right? So when I started writing it, and, you know, maybe I didn't do this consciously then because I was younger, but now I think, yeah, can I imagine her like having somebody she loves, if she wants to be in a romantic relationship? Can I imagine it? Yeah, okay, then she should have it. Like, why shouldn't she have it, right? Like, why shouldn't she be not timid? Why shouldn't she be not poor? Like, why shouldn't she not have everything that she wants? Because I think we do, whenever we assign those stereotypes to any group, it's usually, it's a lack of, like we say, you know, it's not realistic that you would have this. Not realistic you would be this rich. It's not realistic you would be this educated. It's not that realistic that you would have, you know, whatever, trying to stay PG-13. So, you know, it's not realistic that you would have those things. So I think, you know, you sort of have to turn all that on your head and think, like, why not just give them everything? Like, why not turn those lacks away? Because to be true, white characters can have everything. It's like kind of like a guy, you know, you never ask a guy, can you have it all? Because you just assume he can. But women get asked that all the time, right? Like, I'm constantly being asked, oh, can you balance that? And, you know, 2 careers and a child and a husband. I'm like, why not? Nobody asks men if they can balance all that. Like, why can't I like, why can't we even like fathom this idea? So it is a few things sort of at play when you write characters of color, especially.
Okay. You've kind of gone into my halfway answered my next question, which is awesome. So my next question is about writing female characters in general, not necessarily Asian characters, right? And like we saw with Livy, she wanted to be tough and strong, but she was going through a really bad time, and so she needed to cry. And a lot of women in real life, not just characters on the page, you are expected to be feminine and sexy and pure and submissive and strong and tough and everything. And
I'm so tired.
right? And especially in the romance genre where happily ever afters are expected, we're so used to seeing women like this, these kind of characters who don't have any like depression, and they don't go through all these you know, they don't go through what Livy goes through. Do you ever get any flack for not making them likable or relatable enough, or going through all these things?
No, you know, I do know, you know, I was at this conference once and this author said to me, like, oh, I thought about writing a book with a character with depression, but then I thought, well, it's a happily ever after, so she'll have to be like cured by the end. And I was like, oh, that breaks my heart. Like that you think that, because then, you know, sort of what you're saying is, well, certain like huge segments of the population can't fathom the idea of a happily ever, like that doesn't make sense to me, and that's not kind to me. And it's not realistic, right? If we're going to throw that word around, that's not realistic. And occasionally, you know, somebody will say, oh, she's too mouthy, or she's, you know, swears too much, or you know, all that. But I think likability is very, very subjective. And I think, I was actually watching this Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, is a favorite show of mine. And I was watching the creator, who's also the star, and she was, somewhere giving us, Q&A. And somebody asked her the same question, like, don't you wonder that this main character isn't likable? Because she is kind of a mess. And she's kind of evil sometimes too. Like, she's not always the great person. And she said, my goal isn't to make the person likable, to make these characters likable. My goal is to make sure that you understand where they're coming from. So maybe relatable is a better word. And so I hope that that's kind of what I'm doing. Like, even if you wouldn't want to be her, and I think that's some people think like that's sort of the idea, that you're standing in for the heroine. I don't necessarily believe that's true, because I don't really do that when I read. Even if you don't want to be her, that's fine. But maybe you want to go have a drink with her. Like, maybe you want her to hire you. Maybe you want her to, maybe you want to go to a party with her or something, or, something like in some way. I hope that they, even if they can't like them or be like them, I hope they can relate to them.
Yeah, understand where they're coming from. Yeah. All right. Okay, so we have a few questions coming in from the audience. Let me do. Okay, I'll ask Jane Hendry. Excuse me, Jane Hendry's question. She says, "I'm really looking forward to the right swipe. What are your top tips for using dating apps?"
Oh my God. How much time do we have?
Maybe like 3 top tips.
Okay. Okay, first let's focus on safety, right? So my number one top tip is, when you log into Bumble or Hinge or whatever, they usually pull from your Facebook. So they put your real first name on there. If you have a unique real first name, change it. Do like a fake Facebook account, put a fake name on there, change a letter in it, whatever. Because I've actually had, like, they can stalk you. Like, people can find you and find you on Facebook. So change your name on your Facebook, make a fake dummy Facebook account, put like Jane Doe as the name, and plug it into your apps. And you can definitely change it later. Like, when you're texting them, be like, by the way, this is my name. I use it for safety. Ha ha. They'll never care. The other one also for safety is, don't use pictures that you use anywhere else on the internet. So, because it's easy to like sort of reverse image search them, and a lot of people don't understand that. But I can I'll take a guy's photo and I'll pop it into reverse image search, and I can go really deep in Google on that. I don't usually, but I could. So just so you know, that's what could happen. And there's definitely been a time where I've showed up for a date and the guy is like, "Oh yeah, at this business you worked at in like 2003." And I was like, "What? How do you know that?" And he's like, "Oh, you Google." And I'm like, "It's like on the 5th page of Google. Who goes that deep?" But some people do, so be careful with that. And I would, third tip, I'll say, as far as making your profile, don't use anyone else like in your pictures. Like, make sure they're all just about you, because it gets really complicated when you're in groups of people or anything. And also, when you write your profile, focus on the things that you want and not the things that you don't want. So, because it is sort of like our tendency to be like, oh, like, I don't want someone who does this and I don't want someone who does that. And if there's something that's like really a hard line for you, yeah, fine, put it in. But like, generally, I found that it is a lot easier. And because I do this when I see a guy and he's like, "Oh, I don't want this and this and this." And I'm like, forget it. Seems like, like a jerk, not pass it. Bye. And maybe you're not a jerk. Maybe you're just tired. And like, I get tired too. And I'm like, I don't want any of this, and I make a laundry list of things that irritate me. But just skip that for now. Like, you can always, that's stuff that you can vet, as it goes along, and keep the list in your head for sure. Or in your notes app on your phone, and kind of tick them off if they hit them. And then finally, I would say, just don't ignore any red flags. Like, even if they're yellow flags, just go with them. Trust your gut.
Yeah, cool. Great tips. Isn't it a little bit sad that most of the tips are about safety and like keeping
protect yourself?
No, but I mean, totally. They're very important. It's very, very important when you're doing online dating. You don't know who these people are, and you don't know.
And it doesn't occur to you sometimes, like the things that, like the images, I didn't even think about until I was looking at someone. I sent it to my friends. I was like, "What do you think of this guy?" And she like popped him right into reverse image search and was like, "Oh no." You can do it if you really want. Like, don't make sure you're careful with your photos that you put in there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Next question from Natasha R. What inspired you to write in the romance genre?
Oh gosh. I had so much market research in terms of my decades of reading. I started reading romance when I was like 12. I was basically babysat by the library for a good portion of my adolescence. So I would go there after school until my mom was done with work. And I'd sit there and I'd do my homework. And then when I was done with my homework, I would just sort of walk the racks and I just always kept going back to the romances because they really had, and I'm still kind of like this, like my brain needs like stimulation from different genres and different things. And romance is really a genre that, you can have it all. Like it's contemporary, historical, sci-fi. So yeah, I just loved it. Like I fell in love with it at a young age. I couldn't stop loving it. I was on the AOL message boards when I was like in my teens and like, networking with authors, little meaning like I was just gushing over them, like, oh my God, I love you so much. Like Cameron, like, so Jane Ann Krantz, you're my favorite, so I was writing them love letters. And then I was, I think in my 20s, I was like, and I remember saying to my college roommate, I'm going to write a romance, like in my junior year of college. And she was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And so recently we saw each other and, she's married and has 2 kids now. And I was like, remember when I told you that in college, like thinking like, oh yeah, like it'll be like a nice moment. And she's like, I don't remember that at all. I was like, oh man, I was like, well, I remember for sure happened. So yeah, so it's always been kind of in the background. I've always loved it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so which brings us to my next bunch of questions is about the romance genre. It is the best-selling genre today, but it has been criticized for being anti-feminist, for providing unrealistic portrayals of sexual and romantic relationships and glorifying toxic relationships. In your books and stories, you always make it clear that consent is vital in relationships and it isn't a death knell to romance. However, the line between consent and coercion is not always clear in romance books. Do you think this is an issue that romance writers have started tackling successfully in recent years?
I think we've been tackling it for a long time. And I remember like when I was young in the 90s, and when I was first starting to read this, there were a lot of books that I read and I at 15 was like, this seems wrong. Like, this is terrible. Like, oh my God. But like I consumed romances at a huge capacity. So that means there were like hundreds more that didn't do that, And I think, we have a tendency in every sort of generation to be like, oh yeah, well, we were the ones who started it. But this conversation has been going on for a long time in this community between the readers, between the writers. I remember being 16 and there was sort of like a dubious consent scene in a book where the hero, like they get together while I believe he's drugged or something like that. And I remember being on the AOL message boards at 16 and there was like a 500 message thread of people who were like, this is not appropriate and, whatever. This was like 94, 90, like this was like, or 99, I guess. But, like this was not recent. This was pretty old. So like we've been talking about this for a while. And I think sometimes, because this has been in the news a lot lately, people think that we sort of just started this conversation. And we haven't. It is really important to me. It should be important to everyone. And I think part of it is because I do have a lot of siblings. So I learned from an early age, you ask for what you want. Like you don't just take things like that. And that's like a playground rule, right? And we don't think it's weird or silly when they're 3 to say, no, you can't just take something from someone. Like they have to consent to it. Like we don't say it like that, but that's what we mean. And suddenly when it gets into women and men and, or other genders, like, it becomes, in the bedroom or in romantic relationships, suddenly becomes like this, like gray area. Like, I don't, and it is strange that that happens.
But you say we've been talking about it for a long time, and which we have. But why do you think it's taken such a long? Why has it taken such a long time for people to change and get to this point where we are?
I think honestly, it's social media, right? Because I think it makes the world much smaller, and so it makes it easier for us to sort of get points across, for marginalized groups to sort of come forward and say like, this has been going on for a long time. We're done. We're finished. And then sort of that message gets amplified quicker. And I think that is like the one good that social media has done, and it's allowed marginalized groups, and people who sometimes are not listened to have a platform where they're listened to. If Twitter, I mean, Twitter is like low key evil, and so is Facebook. But like, I'm still on the fence about Instagram, but like the other two are very, very evil. But like, if it's done anything, I think it's done that. So I think it has sort of brought this to a head. We have a hashtag now. Like that's like a big deal, to have a hashtag, because that means you can find things. Like when you have a hashtag on something that everybody knows, that means you can click on the hashtag and find a lot of abuse, but you can also find other resources and other people who are talking about it. And so I think that's really what it's really bringing it to the forefront now.
Okay. The male-female relationships in your stories do develop into pretty equitable ones over the course of the story. How do you think stories that model this type of relationship would translate into putting a stop to violence against women?
I honestly think it's about respect. And it's what I told my siblings, like when they moved into their dorms, I was like, I don't care if you hate or like your roommate, but you better respect them. Like that's all it is. And I think that's true for every sort of interpersonal relationship. Like you should respect the other person that you're in that relationship with. I respect my mother. I respect my siblings. I respect my partner. And I respect my friends. Like I wouldn't do something to them that I know they don't want. And so I think that is something that I do bake into my books. I think, even when even in Hate to Want You, where they're enemies, right? And like they have had this very long history of bad blood between them, they still respect each other at the end of the day. And they wouldn't try to go past, like they wouldn't do things that go past boundaries. And if they do, they would feel really mad. And so, and I think that that's sort of where we have to model that in real life. Like, and listen to what people say. I think that's also really important, because I think we don't listen sometimes. And, there's a lot of ways we can say no and or stop, and people don't hear those ways sometimes.
Yeah. Do you think there's room in romance for reframing how stories describe men away from hostile and toxic stereotypes towards complexity, maybe even vulnerability? Do you think this can be one of the ways romance writers can break away from toxic tropes that promote toxic masculinity and the dehumanization of women?
Oh, sure. I think I think when we have books about relationships, and particularly, in heterosexual relationships, or heterosexual romances, I think that there is room for that, because you have the room to sort of portray someone in a light maybe they're not portrayed in other forms of media, and then they're happy at the end. So like, when somebody's happy at the end, you're kind of saying like, it's good that they're this way, it's happy that they're this way. And if they had been toxic, they wouldn't be happy at the end. So I do think it's important. And the great thing is about, there's so many romances and there's so many ways to portray people. So, it would be good to not sort of have like this He-Man stereotype kind of pushed around, and, maybe have like room for other kinds of other men, different kinds.
Do you think this sort of alpha male violent type character is going to be phased out of genre fiction like romance as cultures worldwide start kicking out toxic masculinity? Or do you think it's one of the stereotypes that is going to stick around for much longer than expected?
Oh, no, I think it'll be around forever. Which is not maybe the message you want. But there's readers for that book, right? Like there's readers who love that sort of old school, like guy who maybe like pushes people around a little bit. I do think that there is very, very fine line. Like, and like alpha is a bit of a, I have trouble with the whole alpha beta distinction because I don't really know what it means. I prefer to sort characters into Hogwarts houses because I think that sorts things out better. But I do think that, like some people just like reading that stuff, and that's, that's fine. Like that's fine as long as you don't carry it into your day-to-day life. People can read all sorts of things and not believe them or want them to be true. There's always going to be a market for every type of book. I mean, that's right. And that's, in one way, it's kind of good because it's like, well, now, there's a market for my books. Like there's a market for other books. So like, I don't think it'll go away completely, but I do think I think it's good that people are thinking about it more. Because maybe when you think about it more, you make different choices that, you can still kind of have the window dressing and maybe tweak something here and tweak something there if you're an author who likes to write that kind of character. And, I think it's just good. Anything that makes people think a little bit harder about what they're doing and what they're putting into the world is a good thing.
Yeah. Right. Okay, guys, we have lots more questions to come, but please do keep your questions coming. I'm sure Alisha will be very happy to answer them. Meanwhile, Alisha, what Hogwarts house are you in?
I'm a Hufflepuff, and I think you asked me if yellow is my favorite color.
Is that why?
It isn't at all. I just really like yellow separately of being a Hufflepuff. But I am very happy that all the Hufflepuff gear is black and yellow because it does fold nicely into my wardrobe. I am very much a Hufflepuff. I feel like a lot of my friends are Ravenclaws, so I feel very passionately protective of those two houses.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Well, I should go and get myself sorted, I think.
Yeah. I think behind you, you're probably a Ravenclaw. I'm guessing.
Maybe because all the books. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'll see. Okay, so on to the next question. Let's see. Your novels are inherently feminist because you highlight sexism and misogyny, violence against women, the limited options that women have for steering their own lives, especially when things go wrong. What do you say to readers and reviewers who complain that your books are too preachy about feminist issues or to be properly romantic?
I don't know if anyone's told me they're too preachy to my face, so maybe those are in there. I don't read the reviews, so I don't know. Maybe that's in there. I would say, you don't have to read them. I think that's usually and same for anything, right? Like if you don't enjoy something, you shouldn't have to read it. I think I do work very hard at folding the things that I value, which are, consent and respect and feminism and, not liking toxic masculinity and all of that. I think I fold them pretty well into an entertaining story. So yeah, if they are preachy, I hope they're not, because I work very hard to make them not preachy at all and to make sure that, there's a lot of people who just read my books and say, oh my God, that was a good book. And that's it. Like they don't go for the deeper themes and they don't read any of that. And I'm happy for them. That's great. And then there's other people who have very long book club discussions about, all these things in my books that I didn't even know were in there. And I'm like, oh, wow, you're geniuses, because I didn't even know I was putting any of that in there. Wow, that's great. So I think I hope there's something in there for everybody. But if not, there's plenty of books that are not my book.
Do you find it difficult to write about these issues with necessary sensitivity without making it seem gratuitous?
No, I mean, I think that I think everybody, whether they say so or not, they're putting their values and their thoughts and their, the way that they consider the world into their books. The absence of things doesn't mean that they don't have an opinion. And I think sometimes we say that, like, oh, well, if it's silent on something, like that means it's like neutral, but it's not really neutral. When you're silent on something, you're still putting something in there. So no, I think about, like, even when I like, I think I'm hilarious, but like, even when I'm making jokes or something, I'm very careful, like when I make a joke about something in a book, or if I'm writing like a funny dialogue, or even if I'm like tweeting on Twitter to think about like what that joke is saying and who it's about, and how am I punching, and where's the amusement coming from. And I think we should just be careful. I think we should work to think about what we put into anything. If you're writing something, you should be thinking about what those words mean and who they're directed at.
How do you think authors can strike a balance in storytelling between raising awareness about, these issues, like they're tough human rights issues. Violence against women is a human rights issue. Like striking a balance between these things and telling an engaging story without being pedantic and preachy?
I think about the stories that I would like to read, and I try to craft stories that like, oh man, like I would like to read this. I don't like to read it when I'm doing it, but then afterwards when I pick it up, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm glad I did this. Like this makes sense. So I think at a core level, you should know your market. I deeply know the romance market because I read so much, but know your market, and the story should be one that you enjoy as well. I know what books I enjoy, and I know what messages they're giving me, whether those messages are overt or not. Uh, I think it's quite easy to do this. I mean, not easy, but I think it is. I think it is possible to tell an engaging story and also, put in some Easter eggs for the people who want them. It's kind of like
Okay.
world building in a way. Like, fantasy authors do it all the time where they craft an engaging story, and then for the super fans, they like put in a couple little things in there for them to, like that's what you're doing basically.
Okay. Do you think it's important for influential authors such as yourself, who you're read all over the world, to make a conscious effort to include characters in your stories that show readers the importance of treating women as respecting women as equals and as just human beings?
Yes. I think this is sort of one of those things, and I can't speak for other authors, right? Like I feel an immense responsibility when I sit down to write a book. So much so that writing a first draft is actually like paralyzing for me. Like it takes me a very long time to write the first draft, and then editing is so much fun. But to get it out, because part of me every time I write a sentence, I'm thinking, like, am I harming anyone? Is this going to hurt anyone? Like, am I doing this right? And sometimes I do have to get out of my own way just to get the book out, to get the draft done so I can get back and edit it. But I feel an immense responsibility when I write anything, and I think part of that is because I did start reading romance when I was so young. I think I read a statistic that 60% or 70% of romance readers start, under 17. So, I know my books aren't for teens, but I know there's teens who read my books. And when you're young, when you're in your teens or your 20s or whatever, your brain's still sort of growing and you're still figuring out, relationships. I'm in my 30s and I'm still figuring out relationships. So this is sort of an ongoing process that you're going through always. 40s, 50s, 60s, you're still sort of figuring out interpersonal relationships. So, but especially for the younger group, I think it is important to sort of put something out that maybe they're not seeing in a lot of other forms of media that they're consuming. But I don't know about other authors. I mean, maybe they don't think about it at all. It'd be nice kind of not to think about it.
All right, so I want to ask you about own voices authors, because you're an own voice author. You write about people who are from your own community. Now, stories are one of the most powerful ways about bringing about change, because stories are what drives and reinforces cultural norms and narratives. Own voices authors like yourself, Helen Huang, Nalini Singh, Beverly Jenkins, you've addressed the issue of violence against women in your work. What can own voices romance authors contribute to the discussion of violence against women in the romance genre and across wider romance community conversation about this issue?
I actually talked about this sort of recently, and this is a bit of a side jump, but some of my books are own voices, but I don't know if I think it's hard to be like an own voices author, because then people who haven't read me go, oh yeah, she writes Indian American romance, and I don't know what that is. So I will say some of my books are own voices, yes. I don't think anyone can really be an own voices author itself, but I do think it's important, and I'll say this, for the books that are of mine that are own voices and for the books that are not, it is important to be inclusive in terms of which authors are being published, because we need more points of view. So we need people who have not traditionally been writing in any genre, in certain genres. In romance, it's predominantly been sort of a white, cisgender, heterosexual, Christian, dominant point of view. And we need to diversify that, because what happens is when they write our stories, if you're an outsider, and maybe even if you are taking care, sometimes it is it is hard to nail it. It is very hard to sort of get sort of all the subtleties and you know, all the things that make up your world. And I'll give you an example. I wrote in Wrong to Need You, the heroine is Pakistani American. And when I would tell people that, there was always a divide along the responses that I would get. And white authors would go, "Oh, okay, so that's your own voices then. That's familiar to you." And then South Asian, you know, friends or authors would go, "Oh, that's so different for you." You know, like that's such a different world for you. And I'm like, so it is, you know, that subtlety is not something that I think you get if you're not an outsider, because it's not own voices for me. I'm Indian American. And it's a very different culture, you know, different religions, different everything, different countries. So I was like, but I knew enough that I knew that wasn't own voices for me, and I knew enough to know that it was a different culture. But I think sometimes, you know, maybe somebody who's not from even that area of the world, or who doesn't, you know, have that, wouldn't know that. And so, fine, yes, write whatever you want to write. I'm not saying that you can't, but it is important to get multiple people in those chairs so that we can sort of get different points of view from all of them, because they are all very important and we don't get them otherwise.
Yeah. Do you have any specific advice or tips for romance authors who wish to include or address violence against women in their stories?
I like to say that the romances that I love, you know, very heavily sort of feature a heroine who gets everything she wants, right? And so I think when you kind of approach it from that point of view, whatever it may be that she wants, I think that it is, you know, give her everything. Like, you know, give her everything. And part of that is, you know, having a partner, and in heterosexual romances, you know, having a male partner who respects you and wouldn't raise a hand to you and, you know, will treat you well and will not do these things that could hurt you. And I don't think, you know, I feel like that's such a low bar, right? Like having a man who respects you should be the lowest bar that your partner should hit. So it's not a fantasy, you know, and I you know, and you brought that up too, right? The unrealistic expectations. I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation. I think that is literally the floor of like what a man should walk in on. Like a man who doesn't hurt you is like very, very low. So start there and then build up from there.
Yeah. Okay. Now, before we went on air, we were talking about conversations between characters in your books and how they, you know, whether they pass the Bechdel test or not. And we were saying that in romance, sometimes it's a little bit difficult because the relationship is actually the central plot of the whole story, and you want to be talking about the guy with your friends.
Yeah.
So as a romance author, I know that you believe it's important for stories to pass the Bechdel test, but how do you go about making sure that your stories do pass the Bechdel test?
You know, it is hard because the books are what, maybe max. My books are usually around 80,000 words, which is on the long side for a romance, 80 to 90,000. So you don't have a lot of room. It seems like a lot of words, but it's not. And so you do have to, you know, move this relationship forward and also, you know, show these two characters as two whole human people. So when you donate, like when you give a whole chapter to just one character of that couple, or if it's triad or whatever, you know, when you give it to just one of them, you have to make that scene work a little bit towards the main thing. I think the way you do it in romance is your character should have lives other than the other person. So in that scene that I read, right, like they do talk about the hero, but kind of obliquely. Like it is more about her. It is about her life apart from him, and he is sort of like a tertiary thing that just kind of, you know, happened to her at that moment. So I think that that's sort of the way you do it, even if you do talk about like a guy, if it's two women talking about a guy somewhere, you know, have them have whole other lives apart from them. And I say this as somebody who, you know, when I was younger, sometimes it felt like when I got into a relationship, I didn't have any other life. Like that was my whole life, you know? And I think that happens to a lot of women because that's sort of how we're raised, right? Like we're raised to say, like, our whole world revolves around this partner that we have now. because it's so much work, like, and we take on that work. So I think in your day-to-day life and in your like real life, it's important to have a whole other life. It's important for your characters to have a whole other life apart from them too.
Yeah. All right. That's great advice for characters and for real life.
Yes.
All right. So we've been talking for an hour, believe it or not. Yeah. And guys, if you guys do not have any more questions for Alisha, I'm gonna ask my final question.
Okay.
So now, Alisha, you've been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. It's a bit of an obvious question, but could you tell us why you support the cause to end violence against women, and what do you think authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
You know, it is kind of an obvious question, right? Because it is such a objectively terrible thing, and yet it continues, and that's sort of the hard part about it, because you know, we say we can raise awareness and, you know, all this, and at some point it's like, why do you need to raise awareness? Like, why? Like, why do you need to raise awareness to stop hurting people? It doesn't make sense. But
Right.
here we are in society.
Yeah, like people need to be told, don't hurt other people.
Like, and you know, like nobody really has to be like, you're burning down houses. Somebody would be like, hey, that's a bad idea, right? Like, you know, we all kind of agree.
But somehow, I've had a conversation with other authors as well. Sometimes women are not seen as people. Women are people.
And with the house analogy, sometimes houses are protected more than women. So, you know, like it is such a wild thing. So, I mean, I guess because I see women as people, and so, you know, I want to protect people. Like, I don't think people should be hurt. And I think as far as, you know, what authors can do, I think it's kind of doing exactly what we're doing, is just, you know, thinking deeply about what we're putting out in the world. Everything we put out has a consequence. And I believe that about everything. You know, all of our actions have some sort of consequence. And maybe this is the Hindu in me that's like, it'll come back to you. Like, it's going to come back to you one way or another. But it'll come back to you. Like, everything is sort of a butterfly effect. So, you know, we have to, when we write anything, I think we have to write mindfully and conscientiously about what we're putting out for people to consume.
Okay, great. All right, so we've come to the end of our session. Yeah, so thank you everybody who asked questions, and thank you, Alisha, for giving us amazing answers and sharing your perspective with us. I'm going to put myself back on screen. Hi, guys. So as mentioned earlier, Alisha generously donated some awesome goodies to the stash of author goodies we have set up as perks for donors on our Rally Up, Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. Now, both of these goodies have been snapped up, but I'll just tell you what they are because they're pretty awesome. One is a written critique session for a 1,000-word query letter or excerpt from a work in progress or proposal for somebody who writes romance or who needs an experienced pair of eyes to provide some feedback. And treat number 2 is a Skype call, a one-to-one Skype call with Alisha, where she's happy to chat about her books and writing and reading and lots more. And both goodies, like I said, have been snapped up, and both donors are requested to remain anonymous. But once again, we'll say thank you very much. You are amazing people. Now, we do have many more goodies. There are plenty more goodies from authors such as Jan Williams, Tanetta Reeve Dew, Caroline Kapnis, Alma Alexander, Liana Renee Hyber, Molly Tanzer, Rebecca Roanhaus, and so many more. So please do give generously to help us reach our goal. We are at $3,520 and we're aiming to reach $5,000. And all funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. I am going to share a slide with you guys where all the links are. Here we are. Can you see that, Alisha?
I can.
Okay, awesome. So here we are. Here's the slide. Yeah, so these are all the links that you need. Go to our Reddit fundraising page. It's bit.ly/r4p Rally Up IWD 2019. Now, our chat box moderators are typing in the link in the chat box, so you can just go and click from there. Now, if you want to learn more about our Read for Pixels, go to bit.ly/readforpixels. This is the last one, but we will have another campaign coming up in September where we have another whole series of authors. So watch out for that. And if you want to find out more about the Pixel Project, about our celebrity male role model Pixel Reveal campaign, about violence against women, about what you can do to help end it, please visit the Pixel Project's website. It's www.thepixelproject.net. Okay, so that brings us right to the end. I'm going to put Alisha back on screen. Alisha, do you have any announcements or anything that you want to share with the fans?
So somebody mentioned I have the right swipe coming out in July 2nd. So keep an eye peeled for that.
Okay, July 2nd, few months. Awesome.
It's very quick. It will come fast. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So thanks, Alisha. Thank you very much. Thanks to the audience. We had a few people asking questions as well. Thank you for that. And I'll say good night from both of us, or good day wherever you are in the world.